All right, it is 21 July 2022, day 148 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The previous sit rep was done on day 120, 23 June. The obligatory reminders. I get my information from multiple sources. I get it from governmental and non-governmental sources. I get my information from mainstream media. I get it from alternative media and journalists, independent journalists on the ground in Ukraine. I try to get it from as many sources as possible because the truth lies somewhere in there. Also, the reminders, I do not support Zelensky and the oligarchs that are in charge of Ukraine. I damn sure do not support the neo-Nazi shitbags that are fighting in the Ukrainian military. And I do not support Putin and the oligarchs in charge of Russia. Alright, let's jump into this. The United Nations is reporting as of 4 days ago. There's no official numbers as of today. The last numbers posted are from 4 days ago from the United Nations. Civilian casualties, 5,110 killed, 6,752 wounded. Battle damage assessment. Ukraine claims for Russian forces. They have killed 38,850 Russian troops. Now, the British did a Ministry of Defense press release today. They're estimating 50,000 Russians have been killed or wounded. The US CIA did a press release within the last 24 hours stating that they believe 15,000 Russians have been killed and 45,000 Russians have been wounded so far in the fighting. Ukraine is playing it up on their official websites that they have killed 12 generals, 43 colonels, 76 lieutenant colonels, and 10 Navy captains. Okay, equipment destroyed. Reminder, as always, I have the number that's claimed by the Ukrainian military and the number that can be independently confirmed from photographs and videos off of the battlefield. Okay, claimed 1,704 tanks destroyed, confirmed 873. Armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, claimed 3,912 destroyed, 1,720 confirmed. Artillery systems, claimed 859, confirmed 215. Multiple launch rocket systems, claimed 251, confirmed 92. SAM systems destroyed, claimed 113, confirmed 65. So we're starting to see a massive shift in that number between confirmed and claimed. In the past, over the last 4 months, the two numbers have been pretty close together, but now we're seeing a big separation. Fixed-wing aircraft claimed 221, confirmed 38. Helicopters 188 claimed, 49 confirmed. Drones claimed 710, only 98 confirmed. Trucks claimed 2,781, confirmed 1,254. Ships claimed 15 sunk, confirmed 10. Now, numbers on Ukrainians. Russia says that they have killed 23,367 Ukrainian troops. Ukraine says they've only lost around 10,000 troops so far in the war. And they also state that there have been 5,600 Ukrainian soldiers captured on the battlefield. Now, equipment. Ukraine does not release any numbers, and there is no current numbers from Russia for equipment destroyed, so all I have is the confirmed numbers here. And these numbers, I seriously believe, are extremely low. By how much? I really can't guess. Anywhere from, it being 1/5 to 1/10 of the actual losses is my guess on some of these. Tanks confirmed 218 lost. Armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles 456 confirmed. Artillery 88 confirmed. Multiple launch rocket systems 20 confirmed. SAM systems 43. Fixed wing aircraft 38. Helicopters 11. Drones 25, and I know that is probably a considerably larger number than that. I'm guessing the true number is probably anywhere from 10 to 20 times that number have been lost on a battlefield for the Ukrainians because of how heavily they use drones on a battlefield. Supposedly confirmed they've lost 315 trucks, ships, 19 sunk. Now, there is a report I came across not long after the previous sit-rep, an interview done with the company commander of a Ukrainian Marine company. He admitted to the press, and I think it was Sky News out of Australia, he admitted that his casualties have been extremely high in his unit. He has seen 80% casualties in his unit since the start of the war. Medics attached to the unit state that the only people that are left in the unit are raw recruits that have joined since the war, that are poorly trained, that almost all of the professionals that were in the unit when the war started are dead. And I've seen other reports on that, similar types of percentages and stuff reported in other interviews, to include interviews that were staged with foreign fighters in the Ukrainian military, stating similar numbers, that they're seeing 70 to 80% casualties from what they had at the start of the war. So the Ukrainian casualties are considerably higher than anyone wants to admit. Probably double of the Russian casualties is my guess, going by some of these numbers we're hearing from these people actually on the ground. Now, battlefield itself, up around Kharkov, there's been no real movement. Reportedly, it's been a lot of artillery duels back and forth and localized assaults that really have not done anything. Over in the Donbass region, there has been considerable gains in that area. Russia now controls Luhansk, and they're working on securing the rest of the Donetsk. I do not have a good location for the front lines. A couple maps I looked at show this massive area here has been captured by the Russians. Other maps are still showing the front lines are back here. But when you start looking at names of villages captured by Russian forces since the last sit-rep, the front lines are somewhere in here, far to the west where the Ukrainians and the media will admit it, but behind where the Russians claim. So somewhere in here is the actual front lines. Crimea, there's reports that Russia is reinforcing their gains. They have been pushing more towards Mykolaiv, with reports that they are well within artillery range in some locations next to Mykolaiv. So the front line should be a lot closer, but most of the maps still say the Russians are south of the Dnieper River. No one wants to admit where the front lines are, especially the Ukrainians. From what I can draw from the reports I've been reading on the front lines, the Russians are going back to old school tactics. They are surrounding entire Ukrainian units, battalions and brigades, cutting them off from reinforcements from the west, and then they pound the hell out of them with artillery and then pinpoint airstrikes. pound the hell out of them, and then they get them to surrender, or they then send in their troops and kill the Ukrainian troops hiding inside their trenches. Ukraine is stating that they're the ones who are actually on the move. They're the ones that are truly advancing all across the region. Your guess is as good as mine. But from what we're looking at, yeah, I think the Ukrainians are losing badly, and their casualties are extremely high. Okay, combatants. We'll start out this time with the Russians. Some Russian troops who signed short-term contracts to serve are now requesting to be discharged. They are stating they no longer want to fight inside Ukraine. Now, some of these short-term contract troops, and we're talking like less than 12 months, some of these requests are being processed quickly, and then they're being sent back to Russia. Others are at a slower pace, probably because you're inside a combat zone on the front lines. Now, some of the troops, after they've submitted the request for discharge, they do not move to the front lines with their units when they move forward out of rear areas. And there's reports of these troops being arrested for essentially going AWOL. I would point out that until paperwork is processed, you follow the orders given to you. Plain and simple. Anyone who serves in the military should know that. You signed a contract saying you're going to fight. You're willing to serve. Well, until you get the paperwork in hand stating that you're released from that contract, you have to follow orders. Doesn't matter if you turn the paperwork in and it's quote-unquote being processed. Everyone should know that. Doesn't matter what country you're with. Okay. Thursday, July 7th, Putin gave a speech to Parliament saying operations in Ukraine have barely started, hinting that they will take all of Ukraine. This speech seemed to be aimed at populations in the West. Russian military may have lost around 25% of all available vehicles for the military inside Ukraine in the fighting. This is everything from tanks to trucks to jeeps, everything. Okay, next one. There are reports that Russia has destroyed at least 2 HIMARS launchers in eastern Ukraine, and Russia is claiming they've destroyed others that were en route to the front lines. Now, the U.S. Pentagon is stating that they've accounted for all of the HIMARS launchers sent to Ukraine, and the Ukrainian government claims not a single HIMARS launcher has been lost. Now, for actual totals on HIMARS launchers inside Ukraine, most of the reports state that we have currently sent 12 and that are currently in the hands of the Ukrainian military, and there are some reports that there are over 16 that are in the hands of Ukrainian military right now. Okay. Now, Ukraine. Ukraine is still preparing for the possibility of an invasion by Belarus. Remember, Belarus was involved in the beginning of the fighting. They sent some troops up in here around Chernihiv and also around Chernobyl at the beginning of the war, and they pulled back with the retreat from Kiev, and then they officially left the war. Reportedly, the Ukrainians were concerned that Belarus is going to attack towards Kiev again. But it looks like probably what it was is Belarus was preparing to do a training drill on the border, because from the 12th to the 14th of July, Belarus did training with local territorial troops or border troops in the Gomel region on the border. This is apparently near, almost directly north of Kiev. The training was being conducted to test new communications equipment that the Belarusian army had received, and also test the capabilities of their officer corps. Okay, Ukrainian Air Force pilots met with the U.S. Congress about 2 weeks ago, and they asked for U.S.-made jets such as F-16s and F-15s. They told the U.S. Congress that flying MiG-29s is a suicide mission because this is old Soviet aircraft. Reportedly, Congress is seriously considering the authorization of sending F-16s, F-15s, and other U.S.-made aircraft to Ukraine. It should be a reminder that back in March, April timeframe, Putin said that if any country sends combat aircraft to Ukraine, that this is an act of war by that country against Russia, and Russia would respond accordingly on that country's territory. And specifically, I remember it mentioned that if the United States sent combat aircraft to Ukraine for Ukrainian pilots to use, or our pilots use over that territory, they would respond by nuking cities within the United States. Okay, we have a report. The Ukrainian used HIMARS launchers to strike an ammunition depot in the Kherson region, down around here. They hit an ammo depot near Novaya Kakhovka. Secondary explosions from the ammo depot burning killed at least 7 people and over 80 civilians were wounded. Reporters that reported on this asked the question of, where's the anti-war protesters in the United States? How come they're not out there protesting in the White House about U.S. equipment being used to cause the death of civilians? That's a very good question, because they always did that in every other war, but this war, instead, these anti-war protesters are screaming for the death of more ethnically Russian people. Okay, in Greece, on the 17th, a Ukrainian plane crashed near Kavala. Explosions were reportedly heard by the locals for hours from the crash site. The Greek government released a statement that this plane was flying from Serbia to Jordan, and that it was loaded with explosives. The Ukrainian government did do a press release today about this crash, and they stated that 8 Ukrainians died in the crash, and that the airplane was loaded with military equipment and ammunition. Now, personally, I think the plane was on the way to Jordan was bullshit. I got a feeling they were going to end up near the border with Turkey, and then they were going to change their course going northeast and fly into Ukraine with all that equipment out of Serbia. A reminder for people that do not know this, Serbia is officially a Russian ally. So them sending equipment to Ukraine would be very bad for them, for their relations with Russia. Over the last week here, President Adolf's wife came to the United States and was presented with an award for the Ukrainian human rights efforts. What a load of fucking bullshit. This ranks up there with Obama getting a Nobel Peace Prize at the start of his presidency. And then that son of a bitch killed more civilians with drone strikes than any president before or since. Seriously, giving a human rights award to the Ukrainian government? These people have been leading a genocide against ethnically Russian people in eastern Ukraine since at least 2014. And we're giving them a fucking human rights award? Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, a report came out today that Zelensky announced on Sunday that he fired another prosecutor general and head of the security services, and that also 60 employees within the prosecutor's office have also been arrested. These employees, to include those former heads of the Prosecutor General's office and the security services, are being charged with treason and collaboration. I wonder if they were digging a little bit too close to the pocketbook of Zelensky, and that's why they got arrested. Or maybe they were doing some backdoor deals to try to end the war by trying to get some type of peace agreement going. Okay, now NATO. The United States is sending 2 more NASAM systems and 4 TPQ-37 anti-artillery radar systems to Ukraine. This came out a couple weeks ago. Apparently the NASAM system is the United States' latest surface-to-air missile system. So we're sending the new stuff to Ukraine now. Okay, there is reports out of the Pentagon, not official channels. People are stating that the United States has sent around 1/3 of our stockpiles of javelins to Ukraine now, and that replacements are not expected to start production for at least 2 to 3 years. And that's only if Raytheon rushes it and somehow is able to get the components they need from China. Yes, you heard right. A lot of the components we need to produce Javelin missiles are actually made in China, not the United States. There is not a single company in the United States that can make a lot of those parts. And the earliest we can see Raytheon starting production to replace the Javelins we've already sent over is 2 to 3 years from now. And that's if they really rush it. Okay, there's reports here that, and this came out last week, that the U.S. is sending $6 billion in cash to Ukraine to help pay the Ukrainian government budget deficit. Yeah, completely ignored a budget deficit in the United States. We're loaning money to the Ukrainian government to keep them from going into deficit. This came out here about a week ago. Senators Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal were pushing legislation in the Senate to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism and Russia officially as a terrorist state. I do not know if this actually came up for a vote or consideration or where it's currently sitting in the Senate. Okay, report here. This came out over this last week. All U.S. uniformed services, all branches, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Force, will drastically fail to meet recruiting goals for fiscal year 2022. And for the U.S. Army, this goal, it was actually reduced drastically back in April. So we're not even going to be meeting the reduced goals for the rest of this fiscal year. Now, the U.S. Army posted today that they for sure are going to hit that 50% mark by the end of the fiscal year, which is October 1st. We're for sure going to do it. But the reports that we're hearing from the recruiting command is they're actually around 40% of the recruiting goals. So they really have to push to get that 10% just to reach half of the minimum required recruits for this fiscal year. And a report came out from the U.S. Pentagon today, or within the last couple days here, to Congress, that the outlook for fiscal year 2023 for recruitment is even worse than it is for this year. Now, the United States Army Chief of Staff General McConville, before Congress, stated that only 23% of 17 to 24-year-olds in the United States are qualified to serve. And of that group, so of that 23%, only 9% are even considering the possibility of enlisting. Now, the rest of that age bracket of 17 to 24-year-olds, which is the prime recruiting bracket for the U.S. military, is disqualified because of criminal history, drug use, mental health problems, and general poor physical condition. Face it, people, we're being set up for a fucking invasion on the continental United States. Okay, it's now official. The United States is sending another $400 million in military aid to Ukraine, and this includes a minimum of 4 more HIMARS launchers and over 1,000 155mm shells. Now, reportedly, this includes some of our newest GPS guided smart shells, the M982 Excalibur. I have a feeling that the entire shipment of 1,000 155 rounds is Excalibur rounds. Along with this will be additional counter-battery radars and tactical vehicles and other stores of munitions and weapons. Now, a spokesman at the U.S. Pentagon stated that they are making plans to supply Ukraine for years to come with whatever weapons and supplies they want. And reportedly stated that the $400 million in aid in this current package is being done by the Biden administration by drawing down U.S. troop strength currently and then sending the equipment that was for those troops to Ukraine. And by doing it this way, the Pentagon does not need, or the Biden administration does not need, approval from Congress to send this equipment to Ukraine. It's considered surplus to needs, and he can just tag it all, box it up, ship it off to Ukraine, whatever the hell he decides that he takes away from those troops, as those troops are withdrawn from the MTO. A report from the British Ministry of Defense today that they are sending 20 additional M109 self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine. These are US-made 155mm howitzers. They're also sending hundreds of drones. They're sending an additional 1,600 more anti-tank weapons with no clarification. Are these NLAWs, javelins, a mix, or what's going? And they're also sending an additional 50,000 artillery shells and 36 L-119 105mm howitzers. This is the same as the United States M119 105mm artillery system. They're the same weapon system. The U.S. had already sent a bunch of them a couple months ago to Ukraine. The European Union has announced a 7th round of sanctions on Russia. In this round of sanctions, they're banning Russian gold from entering the market, but they are allowing Russian banks to accept funds for food and fertilizer that will be sold by Russia around the world. They won't allow the Russian banks to use that money or transfer that money to purchase anything else, but they will allow the Russian banks to receive funds from the sale of Russian-produced food and fertilizers. And that's the last that I have. I came across some reports that Ukraine is currently working on deals to restart the shipment of grain out of Ukraine officially onto the world market. And the question becomes again, if that's the case, you have excess amount of grain, you can sell it on the international market. Why do you need international food aid for your people and for your troops? This is something that's come up before. And that's all the notes I got so far. I do not have any frontline information from Patrick Lancaster behind Russian lines, who follows directly behind Russian troops as they advance forward. He has not posted any videos on YouTube in 2 weeks. I don't know if he's gotten a community guideline strike or what the hell happened. The last posting he's had period on YouTube is from a little over a week ago, where he talked about he had to pull back from the front lines to take care of his family because people were trying to dox his family to try to get them killed. So hopefully he found a safe place to move his family to and they're protected. Because he's one of the few reporters out there who's actually getting close to the front lines on either side and showing what's going on. He's actually been up there on the front lines as the battles are happening. Very few reporters are doing that, especially anyone from the Western media that supposedly is following Ukrainian forces by sitting in hotels in Lviv and Kiev. So that's all I got. Next sit rep will probably be in a month. That seems to work out doing it that way. So probably mid to late August will be the next sit rep on the war in Ukraine. Everything for the most part is fairly stagnant. The Russians are steamrolling Ukrainian units, but it's at a very slow pace. They're annihilating them. Ukrainians are taking very, very heavy casualties. A lot more than what they're admitting in the press in the West. If you follow just information from the media in the United States or in Europe, according to them, Ukraine is winning the war and they're going to be on the Russian border at any time now. But when you actually look at some of the reports from the very front lines itself, it's going extremely badly for the Ukrainian troops. Casualties are high, and they're getting in raw recruits that are poorly trained or not trained at all. They're essentially cannon fodder being pushed to the front lines. Now, for all my engineer brothers and the Patriot and militia movements, always remember Essayons.